Are you ready to dive into the transformative power of entrepreneurship across ASEAN? Join us for an exclusive webinar exploring how dynamic entrepreneurship drives economic growth and sustainable development across the region. We will uncover how digitalization reshapes businesses, from local startups to regional powerhouses, with insights from leading experts in the field. The event kicks off with key findings from recent research on digitalization and sustainability in over 600 startups across ASEAN. Then, stay tuned for an engaging 60-minute panel discussion, as our experts from academia, global tech, and economic development share how ASEAN can nurture ecosystems that fuel growth and sustainability. Welcome to the webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SEADS webinar on the importance of entrepreneurship, driving economic growth, and sustainable development in ASEAN. As we all know, entrepreneurship is critical in driving economic growth and sustainable development across Southeast Asia, or ASEAN. In this webinar, we will explore how dynamic entrepreneurship significantly contributes to the region's private sector development and sustainable progress. We will also delve into the transformative or game-changing impact of digitalization on startups and businesses across various sectors. Now, let me just share a couple of thoughts about entrepreneurship and economic growth and sustainable development. I think it's perfectly logical, or perfectly reasonable, or perfectly plausible for entrepreneurship to contribute to both economic growth and sustainable development. Put differently, entrepreneurs can both make a healthy profit as well as contribute to the fulfillment of sustainable development goals. An excellent example of this is the husband and wife scientist entrepreneur tandem of Dr. Ugur Sahin and Dr. Özlem Türeci, who founded the bio and tech startup. And that startup, those entrepreneurs were responsible for developing one of the world's very first safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines, when everybody in the world, for everyone in the world, that was the one thing everybody desperately wanted, a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. Entrepreneurs were able to deliver that. So I think it's perfectly plausible and reasonable that entrepreneurship contributes not only to economic growth, but at the same time to sustainable development. And that will be the theme of our SEADS webinar today. Now, to kick things off, I invite Professor Willem Smit of Fulbright University Viet Nam to make a presentation on digital entrepreneurship and sustainable performance in ASEAN, evidence from 600 plus startups. Over to you, Professor Smit.
Thank you, Dong-Hyun. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure and an honor, really, to be able to set the stage for this SEADS webinar. I would like to do this by talking about two fundamental changes in the region, as Dong-Hyun already mentioned, the digitalization and the strong need for sustainable development in the region. Allow me to share my slides here. Here we go. Yeah. So yeah, we'd like to share about the important relationship that is between digitalization and sustainability in entrepreneurial startups, with evidence from the region, specifically from the 6 largest Southeast Asian economies. And this evidence is drawn from a study funded by ADB and EAKDF, and was conducted in close collaboration with researchers from 6 schools in the regions. SMU Singapore, Universitas Padjadjaran in Indonesia, SASIN in Thailand, De La Salle University in the Philippines, Dai Hoc Tau Dai Mot and Fulbright University in Vietnam, and Imperial College in the UK. So allow me to start with the main motivation of this study is that when it comes down to addressing climate change and promoting sustainability practices in the economies across the world, we have come to a point that it's all hands on deck. The alarming situation of today requires that all economic actors start doing their share. So we have seen that governments have started setting their net zero targets for their countries, ranging from proposed to policy documents to laws, pledges, and even self-declared achieved status. But we also see that large corporations are either voluntarily or are forced to address these grand challenges of sustainability and report their ESG, environment, social, and government performance. So what about the SMEs and the entrepreneurs? For them, there are no mandatory ESG reporting, and there is no required action to be taken. Yet, they are not an insignificant portion of the economy. In many economies, they are a significant part. So what are they doing? And do they actually want to contribute? Are they going to be sustainability collaborators for transforming our economies to a greener and more inclusive future? And secondly, an associated question, we ask ourselves, how are digital technologies helping them with achieving these good intentions? So to answer that question, we interviewed close to 700 digital entrepreneurs. Six business schools from the region. They approached many entrepreneurs and managed to secure interviews with 685 digital entrepreneurs. And this is some of the profile pictures of the people we interviewed, a random sample of it. And you'll see that their businesses are either small or already scaling, and they also have they're operating different verticals. There is also quite diversity in the adoption and application of digital technologies, and that is what we're interested in this study. So we have a questionnaire. We conducted a data collection, and I will continue with sharing after that with the theory model, and then sharing the findings from this study. From all the countries, we got over 100 entrepreneurs participating, and we had a quite extensive survey list. Close to 200 variables were collected through our survey. That consisted of general questions, firm characteristics about the firm in which industry it operates, but also about the founding team and the individual entrepreneur. As a third, we asked about the way they applied and adopted digital technologies in their business model. And fourth, what is their current performance on sustainability and their business performance? So, but first, we also before starting those results, We asked the entrepreneurs to which extent they want to contribute to sustainable development. And we specifically wanted to know which trade-offs they are prepared to make when they found and grow their business. So particularly, we asked them about three strategic trade-offs. First is about how much weight would they put on financial profits in comparison to achieving environmental sustainability. Second, how important is financial gain compared to the importance of pursuing a social mission. And third is how important is the welfare of employees and suppliers compared to making financial profits. And you see in between here the numbers, the distribution on percentage. So for the first scale, it's about in the middle, the 43% strike a balance between financial profit and environmental sustainability. The second is a similar picture, a bit more skewed to social mission, and the third is very much towards the welfare and of employees and suppliers. We can also look at it from a graph perspective. Then you see that especially the latter one on stakeholder sustainability, as we call it, is more slanted to the right. Perhaps a portion of these high percentages can be explained by an interviewer bias in the form of social desirability. But even if these numbers show an overestimation of the good intentions of the entrepreneurs, it would be interesting to ask the following question. How can digital technologies help them to achieve these maybe conflicting goals of performing for business versus achieving sustainability? So in theory, before I present the empirical results, in theory, we see that digitalization and sustainability are really good and promising combinations also for entrepreneurs and SMEs, because they can help to create more scalability and accessibility. So digital tools provide them the opportunity to scale their efforts without being constrained by geographies. Technologies as AI, blockchain, IoT allow them to monitor, manage, and track the sustainability metrics of a global scale. Secondly, it gives the benefits of cost reduction and efficiency. It's especially with analytics of the data, entrepreneurs are able to identify areas where they can save energy, reduce waste, and also optimize their resource allocation. Third, sustainability is enhanced through digital by new market creations, new digital platforms that allow tokenization and smart contracts. And so businesses can now bring previously inaccessible markets into play, allowing them to for instance, sell sustainability-driven products and services on these platforms. Fourth, digital technologies allow or promote collaboration and ecosystem coordination. So previously, the different actors who could not coordinate so well, but thanks to digital solutions, it is much easier to ensure a collective efforts towards these grand challenges as climate change. And finally, fifth, and that is also what we're going to be looking into more in our empirical analysis, is it allows innovation in business models. So digital tools and sustainability are fostered with new disruptive business models, and especially through experimentation, business model experimentation, entrepreneurs can find a better way to combine their business performance while enhancing and achieving sustainability goals. So this is kind of roughly that model that we want to test, is to which extent digitalization of the business model drives the business performance and sustainability impact. But we also look at what is that the value driving mechanism, in particular, the business model experimentation. Does it allow entrepreneurs to update quickly their business model in response to opportunities that are rapidly evolving? Then we ask our questions, okay, how can we actually measure digitalization of a business model? And for that, we distinguish two main dimensions. First is the adoption of the different digital technologies, what we call the breadth of digitalization. And then secondly is the degree to which these technologies are applied in different business model processes. So the width of it. For instance, for the first dimension, digitalization of business models for the adoption of different technologies, we ask to which extent does your business rely on mobile phones, on homepage websites, even on blockchains, on robotics. And then we see, and this is ranked according to the degree that they are relying on it, is that mobile phones until cloud computing and cloud services are considered rather essential and basic technologies. That doesn't require a lot of specialized skills to apply it and to adopt it into their business model. The others that are applied by fewer digital entrepreneurs require more specialized skills. Then for the second dimension of the business model digitalization, we looked at the degree to which these technologies are used in the different areas of the business model. So perhaps familiar to you is the business model canvas. And we looked at then four specific areas throughout the business model. On one hand, customer-oriented digitalization, to which extent are the processes for identifying, managing customer relations digitalized, to which extent the product offering is digitalized. Then one more to the left, the internal processes, to which extent logistics, HR processes, accounting is digitalized. And the last one is managing the key partners for the business model, for the entrepreneur. And then we see roughly the following development of the following data. There is a bit of a lag here. Okay. Can I try it again? Yeah.
Hey, Willem.
Yeah. Hello.
Michelle has started sharing the screen.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to take over though.
You
Can I do
just say you can just say next.
Okay. But okay. Yeah. Yeah. So here we have the data. So here is that on a 1.5 scale, the digitalization is slightly higher on customer-oriented processes. It's closer to 4, while the others are relatively closer to 3. We explored kind of the digitalization of both the adoption of different technologies versus the business model intensity. And then you see that there is a kind of a decreasing marginal return for the number of technologies being adopted versus the degree to which the business model gets digitalized. We also kind of unpacked that digitalization, customer-oriented and digital technology versus digital technologies. And then we see that for digital-oriented technologies, it rather stays the same, the number of the level of digital adoptions adopted. So it's quite interesting to see that that there are different forms and different configurations of digitalization of a startup, and also if you compare backbone versus customer-oriented. When we then plot that against business performance, we kind of see some kind of, if we eyeball it, some positive relationship. So we dig deeper into this relationship by testing our hypothesis. We also have this hypothesis about the business model experimentation, and then we looked at to which degree the digital entrepreneurs actually adopt and change their business model aspects. So we overall we see that 26% makes major changes to complete rethink in a year when it comes to digitalization or business model, and that is what we'll see is enhanced by the degree to which they have adopted digital technologies. Here I will not make this a very technical presentation, but the main effects that we find is that the digital technology adoption in the processes of the business model enhance performance, financial performance, and operational performance. Also, when it compares to peers, it's not so much the number of technologies adopted. And then there is an additional effect of business model experimentation. The first effect of digitalization of the business model, however, is partly explained by the business model experimentation. And that is that kind of carrying effect that we find evidence for. Then, of course, we have a next question on the sustainability. If we jump over these effects on the found effects on the business experience, then to what extent do these digital technologies help entrepreneurs achieving their desired sustainability impact? We measured 4 different dimensions of sustainability impact. That is environmental sustainability internal, so waste reduction, using renewable and environmental friendly materials, but also externally facing, that is with regards to suppliers and with regards to customers creating green products, and then social responsibility in how they treat their local community. A 4th dimension is direct stakeholders in the form of employees and suppliers. So when we look at those, we see similar effects as we do for business performance, that not the technology, but business digitalization, the application in the business model drives the effect. And again, business model experimentation helps to carry that. We also have some robustness checks that we did. I will not go into details for that. I want to give the room to the panels. But overall, we have 4 conclusions: that digitalization of a startup drives the business performance, and in particular, to the extent that it's applied in their business model, not the variety of technologies adopted. Second, it also helps to achieve sustainability goals, particularly internal environmentability and external environmentability. So within that, business model experimentation is crucial. And again, the variety of business technologies adopted is of secondary importance. It is that that digitalization helps to release that tension that might be between choosing business performance and between business performance and sustainability impact. And so I think that this research is quite insightful for promoting sustainability through digitalization. And so now, with that, I would like to give it back to our moderator, Professor Park.
Thank you very much, Willem, for an excellent presentation. Now I'm pleased to note that we will have a panel discussion, but before we begin the panel discussion, let me just very briefly introduce our distinguished panel. Professor Erko Autio of Imperial College London in UK is one of the world's foremost academic and scholarly authorities on digitalization and digital entrepreneurship. Yi Ling, the Executive Director for Market Launch Global Programs 500 Global, has a lot of practical, on-the-ground, hands-on experience in mentoring entrepreneurs. Julia Ajmone Marsan is the head of startups and inclusion at the Digital Innovation and Sustainable Economy Center at ERIA, or the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Professor Willem Smit is another prominent scholar who has done a lot of research on entrepreneurship and digital entrepreneurship. He's affiliated with Fulbright University Viet Nam. And last but certainly not least, my ADB colleague, James Villafuerte, who is a regional lead economist for Southeast Asia. Now let me begin the questions, the panels. Let me start with Erko. So let me ask you a question that is directly related to the topic of this webinar, and that is this: how and why would digitalization of business models drive sustainability? Erko?
Thank you for the question, Dong-Yun. That would be simply because with digitalization, you can servitize many of your activities, you require less physical infrastructure, and basically you can virtualize your value creation. And as long as you do virtually, you servitize your business, you can even convert your product into a platform that also saves materials and energy and therefore enhances sustainability.
Thank you, Erko. Now let me turn to Julia. Quite recently, ERIA has published the One ASEAN Startup White Paper 2024. Can you please briefly explain or give us the key findings or key messages that emerge from that white paper, Julia?
Thank you, Dong-Yun. It's a pleasure to be here together with my fellow panelists. So many thanks, ADB SEADS, for organizing this very timely discussion. Actually, we did a study that, in a sense, is very coherent with what Willem just presented. We just launched at AREA our Digital Innovation and Sustainable Economy Center with the generous contribution of the government of Japan. This center really wants to promote and scale up the startup ecosystem in ASEAN as one of the key drivers of future economic development of the region. But we really want to focus on how innovation and startups can drive a more sustainable economic development. So this was one of the main issues that we discussed in our white paper. This paper, I hope that someone will share the link in the chat box. If not, I can do it later. It is a paper that were presented and launched during the ASEAN summit that took place at the beginning of October in Lao PDR. So our recommendation were straight, to the leaders of ASEAN. And basically what we are telling everybody, the ecosystem builders, the startuppers, but also the policymakers, is first of all that startups can be part of the solution. This is something that Willem also highlighted. So it's very important that policymakers are supporting startuppers and innovators in the region to develop more sustainable, but also very much SDG-based business models. In our research, we're focusing, of course, very much about sustainability and the green transformation, but we are looking at the contribution that startups are making to all 17 SDGs. And indeed, there is even an infographic in our paper that is really showing that we could find already in ASEAN startups that are really working to address all the 17 SDGs, from disability inclusion, women entrepreneurship, the green transformation, combating pollution, and so on and so forth. So once again, it's about the environment, but also more. I mean, I think Willem referred to social communities already in his presentation, and this is something that we could observe very clearly. We also did a survey. We didn't speak with 700 startups, but we managed to reach out startups, investors, ecosystem builders in all 10 ASEAN member states. And it was very clear that their message were consistent. So let me highlight 3 gaps that were clearly highlighted in our research. First, what startups want is access to markets. So in that sense, further integration at ASEAN level will be extremely important. Let's remember that more integrated and bigger markets are a way to de-risk the entrepreneurial journey of startups, which basically means that if you're a startup in Brunei, one of the smallest markets in ASEAN, and you want to try your business model, you have better chances to be successful if you can not only rely on your domestic market, but you can really tap into additional markets nearby. So access to market. Second, and this is not a surprise, startuppers were complaining about the lack of access to capital. This is something that every startuppers in every country around the world would complain about. But to be true, it's clear that especially in less advanced, in less mature innovation ecosystem in ASEAN, this is a problem. If you're a startupper in places like Cambodia or Laos, you really struggle to convince investors that you can be successful because they don't know these markets. They think that these markets are too risky. So this is the second lesson. I mean, how to, together with the integrating market, also making sure that startuppers everywhere, in every country across ASEAN, they can have, finance opportunities. Third, very important, access to talent. Many of the startups and the innovators we discussed with, they were very clearly saying that although, of course, there are a lot of talented people within ASEAN, this discussion is already a testament to that, still, there are a lot of skill gaps in the region, not in every ASEAN member states, but this is something, where something about ASEAN policymakers need to reflect and invest. And what we are saying is that on one hand, education systems, training systems across ASEAN need to improve from primary cycle to higher education, but this will take time, especially in those member states where education system is weaker. So at the same time, leaders in ASEAN need to think about how to get talent, more circulation of talent, more talent attraction and retention from abroad. Especially post-pandemic, there are a lot of schemes that now are flourishing across ASEAN member states, entrepreneurship visa, startup visa, and this is something that, again, should be discussed and thought about because it will take maybe more than a decade to really improve education systems in the region. Some countries are doing very well. Vietnam is one of the countries that is doing very well and progressing fast, but other countries are not doing as well, in improving and going up rankings. So the issue of making sure that the region is able to attract and retain talent is also a critical one. Also very much for the innovation and startup community. And I'm gonna stop here for now.
Thank you so much, Julia, very clear. Let me now turn to my colleague, James. So ASEAN is one of the world's most dynamic regions. I think everybody's talking about ASEAN as a new economic engine of growth. Currently, it's the 5th largest market in the world. So what do you think is the role of entrepreneurship in the region's economic development in the future or going forward? And what is the role of ASEAN governments in supporting the role of entrepreneurship in ASEAN's economic development? James? You are muted, James.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for organizing this very interesting seminar. When you look at the ASEAN region, I think there are 3 major global trends that it's responding to in terms of growth and development. The first one is the impact of climate risk and environment and natural hazards. The second one is the rising inequality within countries, and the third is actually digitalization. And when you look at the private sector, the private sector is actually responding to these large social challenges. And in ASEAN, when you talk about the private sector, 90% of them are actually small medium enterprises. And recently, we've been seeing the rising role of digital entrepreneurship. I think one of the biggest important role of digital entrepreneurship in the region is actually their transformative role, their innovative way of doing business, which can actually increase productivity and growth. So if you look at the productivity differential between MSME, particularly the small informal sector where small people sell wares, they're about only a tenth to about a quarter of the productivity of large firms. But what we have seen in the region is that the introduction of these digital entrepreneurs are actually increasing the productivity of MSME. So I think in terms of the growth and development, the productivity enhancing role of new models of entrepreneurship is really a big change. The second one is what I've been seeing is that these digital entrepreneurship are beginning to handle big social problems. Whether you're looking at food security in the region, we have seen agricultural digital entrepreneurs who are actually going through more productive agriculture using AI, drones, and they are actually going through less intensive agriculture and also going into multi-cropping, which provides sustainable food supply for the region. So I think that's also very important. But the third trend that I'm seeing is really the uptake of digitalization. And this is where one of my observation is that the advent of digitalization has actually increased the participation of households and individual in business. Before, households and individuals cannot participate in business because they don't have assets. But with the digitalization, business has become asset light. So a household with extra bed or a household with an extra time can use his motorcycle, very small asset, to earn business. So these has actually responded to the inclusivity, responded to the low income source and rising inequality in the region. On the role of government, I think the what we are seeing is that providing the digital backbone is really quite important. And Gilia also mentioned the importance of skills, skills and human capital, particularly after the pandemic. We have seen a lot of scarring in terms of labor and employment. So the government needs to provide that capacity building to hone workers and also entrepreneurs to respond to some of these opportunities. I'll stop here. Dongyun, back to you.
Thank you, James. Very clear. Now let me turn to Yiling, who, as I said earlier, has a lot of on-the-ground, hands-on practical experience in mentoring actual entrepreneurs. So my question to you is this. Many Asian governments allocated funding to spur the growth of startup ecosystems. For example, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Cambodia, and other countries. What do you think is the missing piece here? And what are additional supports and initiatives required to promote the growth of startup ecosystems? Yiling?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And maybe just to set a little bit more context as well. I know James, for example, made a clear distinction between and clarifying what digital entrepreneurship is. So just to set a bit of context, I focus on working with companies, with startups, with founders who are 100% purely in the digital tech entrepreneurship side. So I only work with tech startups. We rarely ever touch, SMEs and other business owners who are not in the tech startup industry itself. So just want to set the context because my views it's pretty focused on that area itself. As you already pointed out, we've been working with startup founders in all these different markets. And I like what Julia said earlier, so I'm going to also tap on that too. I think there are three main gaps that exist today. The first one has to do with nurturing talent, even just nurturing entrepreneurial talent at a much younger age. The second one has to do with nurturing technical talent, and that is across the board, whether you're young or a bit more senior. And the third one is what Julia mentioned around regional collaboration itself. So I'll kind of explain all of that. The first one, which is nurturing entrepreneurial talent, and by that again I mean digital or tech startup entrepreneurship talent. Singapore, I think, has done a fairly good effort in terms of trying to get more students involved in entrepreneurship from an early age. And they do that not just by having, a lot of competitions, hackathons, thanks to the public support in Singapore as well. There are a lot of corporates who run entrepreneurship programs and competitions throughout Singapore. But secondly, also, even through the establishment of programs like the National University of Singapore's Overseas Colleges program, so famously called the NOC, it's been actually pretty famous in terms of the success of generating founders out of Singapore. And so if you look at the startups which are more popular or gain some fame in Singapore, like Carousel and Shopback, the founders are actually NOC alumni. So through programming itself, they've kind of showed that, okay, it's possible to nurture founders at a young age. And I'm talking about university level, but even going a level before. So if you ask me what the gap is, I would say definitely before that, at secondary school level, before they're going to university, before they're deciding what to study, there is still a gap there in terms of encouraging students to really understand more about entrepreneurship and about technology. The second one I would say would be AI talent or tech talent in general. I do think that, with all the works coming up, a lot of different countries are really starting to evaluate what is our AI strategy, and Singapore is no stranger to that as well. We do see a lot of startups telling us that I want to embed it, but we just can't find talent here. I want to stay in the region and build the region, but we can't find enough talent to understand it, what more build it and help us scale. And so you start seeing a little bit of a brain drain going over to the US, where there are abundance of talent, not just coming out from the big tech companies, but also from the universities there. So here in Asia and in ASEAN, I think that's going to be a natural path that we see over the next 1 year if we haven't already noticed it, and that is the brain drain. Our entrepreneurs are going to go over to the US, uproot there, build there, because it's a bigger market and they have access to talent there. So for us to want to really preserve or even grow and stand a fighting chance at scaling the ecosystem here, we have to invest in tech talent and in AI talent. That can be done through policies, through programs, through collaborations and all. And again, like what Julia said, the more we think about a regional approach and opening our markets to each other, I do think that's where we stand a little bit more of a fighting chance. The third one is, again, regionalization. Gone are the days where people kind of believe that, you can land in Singapore and expand in Southeast Asia. That's no longer the case, right? Everyone knows that if you want to tackle Philippines, you go to Philippines. You want to build in Indonesia, you go to Indonesia itself. So why aren't we actively pursuing a way where we can empower each other, startups from each of our countries. When I say each of our countries, I mean the region itself, to really be able to expand in that country through partnerships with the startups locally. This has always been done in, your traditional businesses, right? If you have a distributor or a new consumer product wanting to go in the Philippines, they wouldn't just land there. They will look for a distribution partner locally. Why aren't we applying that to the startup economy and ecosystem? Singapore is now coming up with something called Stage 1, which is a space in Singapore where they're going to allow foreign startups to come in, but not just come in and expand, but to come in, find a Singaporean startup to partner with, and then expand here, and vice versa. Through that partnerships, the Singaporean startups can also tap onto the international startups and expand outwards into those startups' home country. So really creating that bridge and building that connectivity for them. I would love to see more of this, not between Singapore and the US, but between Singapore and the other ASEAN and Asian countries itself. Yeah, something that's more structured like that, where we actually empower and push or facilitate these collaborations between the startups here. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. For Willem, I think one of the questions in the chat box is addressed to you. Where is it? Well, I can't find it. So let me just ask another question. Okay, given the fact that entrepreneurial support from the government varies widely across the ASEAN region, there are no significant differences between countries in terms of the adoption and application of digital technologies by startups. Therefore, would you argue that the quality of entrepreneurship is mainly explained on the level of the individual? Willem?
Yeah, thank you, Dong-Yoon, for that question. And it actually also relates to what Yiling just mentioned on the individual agencies of the startup founders. I think that we talk about a lot promoting entrepreneurship and creating the quantity of entrepreneurship, which is also an important engine driver for the economies here. But we're not making asks to government to standardize, to make it open, to give access. But the entrepreneurial activity that in these circumstances thrive and come up, I think is of unbelievable great quality, that managed to thrive through these institutional voids, if you will. So I think that the direction that Yiling was mentioning of okay, let's build born global expertise and practice in the region to work with teams across, not necessarily wait for government to provide those opportunities, but co-create the international space currently with the existing startups. That I think is the fastest way to move forward by example. Yeah.
Thank you, Willem. I found the question from the audience, so let me repeat the question for you. Let me read out the question for you, rather. What could be the reason for the comparatively lower use of digitalization in process and product as opposed to customer interaction? How are these different across the different life cycle, or I guess this means age, how old the enterprise is?
Yeah, that's a nice question indeed. Yeah, what we measured here was kind of different configurations of digitalization, and I assume it is easier to digitalize these relationship with customers through existing platforms as with social media, and actually to experiment more different value propositions through that side, rather than doing hardcore programming for back-end digitalization. My assumption is that there is a cost differential between the two. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Willem. Now let me get back to Julia. Can you tell us a little about trends in innovation and entrepreneurship systems in entrepreneurship ecosystems in ASEAN in terms of tech, demographics, and so forth? Julia?
Yeah, thanks for this question. Maybe let me highlight what we think are some of the key trends for the development of an innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem in the region. I won't talk too much about the digitalization trend because I think Willem has already explained it very well. But basically, digitalization adoption, digital tech adoption is happening very fast in ASEAN. I think that all of us are familiar with the number of reports, the e-economy and others that are published every year. And what these reports are telling us is that, once again, I mean, some of the economies across ASEAN are amongst the fastest growing digital economies in the world. And this is certainly something that is an enabler of innovation and entrepreneurship, as again, I mean, Willem was just describing before when he was talking about the results of his survey. So this fast pace of digitalization and technology adoption is absolutely something that ASEAN should jump on, should capitalize to basically transition towards a knowledge-based economy as fast as it can, because ultimately this is about, you know, livelihoods of people moving up in the economic development ladder. So this is something that is happening very fast, and it's very positive, you know, when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation. Let's also remember, however, and this is something that ADB is very active on, that there are, you know, because this transformation is happening so fast, we are also seeing emerging divides. And, you know, now there is this phrase, the digital divide, that is becoming increasingly popular. I mean, many people are talking about it because on one hand, we have certain parts of ASEAN where digitalization is happening very fast and driving development. But we also have other parts of ASEAN where, you know, digital technologies are barely accessible. I'm based in Indonesia, the largest countries in ASEAN. And if you look at the map of Indonesia, you have basically half of Indonesia. I'm simplifying a little bit, but I mean half of Indonesia, the population that is concentrated around Java, that is very well connected. But the more you go to the east, toward Papua New Guinea, and you know, these are areas or islands where connectivity is very difficult. Lots of smaller island, logistically issues. Sometimes, you know, broadband impossible to get, or even internet connection, you know, very difficult to access meaningfully. The government is certainly thinking about how to fix these issues, but nevertheless, let's remember that on one hand, we have, you know, these very fast developments, acceleration of entrepreneurship, digital, and on the other hand, some regions in ASEAN where, you know, the situation is completely different. So this is a trend that I wanted to highlight. The other trend I want to highlight is the one about demographics. Digitalization and tech adoption is also happening fast because ASEAN is still a young region. Now I think that according to some recent estimates of the United Nations about, you know, population trends, millennials and Gen Z consumers are becoming the predominant portion of consumers in the region. And this is also, once again, something that is driving innovation, driving technology adoption. We saw it very well during the pandemic because, you know, it's younger people, often mobile first, that are very eager to go online and use these technologies. However, this trend is not going to last forever. So the same UN estimates I was talking about are telling us that towards the end of 2030s, if things, you know, continue to shape as projected, but towards the end of 2030s, ASEAN will start to age significantly. So this is something that is very important, not just, you know, for people that are looking at pension schemes, healthcare policies and so on and so forth, but also for people like us very interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, because ASEAN really needs to capitalize on this young population now. So policymakers really need to make sure, I know it's not an easy task, but or we collectively, policymakers, researchers, ecosystem builders, we need to make sure that ASEAN is really developing its innovation ecosystem before the end of 2030s, before the population start to age, because when that happens, these favorable trends will start to fade out. So the time is now, the window of opportunity is now, we just need to take it.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, Julia. You talked about ASEAN's still, although it is aging fast, still relatively young population in terms of its impact on consumption, right? That's what you mainly talked about now. But in my view, and this is an issue that I find personally interesting and fascinating, is that a country's demographic structure or age structure can also affect its entrepreneurship potential. Because I think, and there are some empirical studies, including some studies published in top journals that document this, that that you have that countries with younger populations, other things equal, are more entrepreneurial because younger people tend to be more creative, more innovative, more risk-taking. They think outside the box, and they are more willing to take risks and so forth. So my question to you is this, back to you, Julia. So do you believe that this kind of demographic structure has a significant impact on a country's entrepreneurship potential?
Yes, sorry for not being clear. Maybe I'm too much of an innovation economist for taking this for granted, but this is exactly what I meant. So ASEAN needs to capitalize on this younger population before it's becoming maybe a little bit too late to really promote entrepreneurship and innovation. These people are the drivers of innovation and entrepreneurship. And on one hand, on the other hand, once again, going back to the consumption patterns, we also know, at least this is sentiment analysis or surveys. So then we need to really understand if this translates into practical actions, practical behavior. But we also know that these younger generations are a little bit more aware than previous generation about, the SDG framework, sustainability. So in a sense, let me be very blunt, there's also money to be made. There's money to be made, if you want to be a startuppers in the, with the SDG-based business model, or, you want to develop something that is very much addressing some of the sustainability and environmental related challenges. Again, this is an opportunity because this generation are more aware, they're more interested. According to some surveys, they're potentially also willing to spend a little bit more, maybe not tremendously more, but they're ready to spend a little bit more, to buy or consume products and services that are greener. So it's really an opportunity. And this is why, once again, the time to act is now, the time to think about this transformation is now, before demographic trends become less favorable. Having said that, let me also say that some developed economies, and this is not necessarily for ASEAN, or about ASEAN right now, but some developed economies, they're now really thinking about what they call sometimes silver entrepreneurship, that is how to promote entrepreneurship amongst older cohorts of a population. Japan is a country, for instance, that is actively thinking about it because they have an aging problem. So I'm not at all suggesting that ASEAN shouldn't really jump on these favorable trends. ASEAN should do it. But there's always hope, and there are also now programs and initiatives that really want to try to push and promote entrepreneurship, not just among the youngest cohort of the population, but also the silver ones.
Okay, thank you, Julia. I'm glad we are on the same page. Now let me turn to James. Earlier, you mentioned the important role of entrepreneurship in economic growth. But can you cite some specific sectors or areas where entrepreneurship can contribute substantial economic value or substantial value to the economy? James?
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, Thank you, Tom. I'll mention probably three areas. The first one is advanced manufacturing. The second one is tourism. And then probably the third most important big area for tech startup is also health and education. I think in Southeast Asia, because this region is really quite globally integrated with the global supply chain, one of our advantage, particularly, for example, in the electronics industry, is our very close relationship collaboration with suppliers, distributor, and large firms, large global firms in this instance. So because we interact with these OEM and software developers, there is a potential for us for digital tech startup to actually find a niche, particularly because now there's a lot of global relocation of factories and global relocation of supply chain. For instance, in the Philippines, there's a new startup that actually specializes in producing some parts and components for Boeing. These are actually advanced manufacturing, and this is located somewhere in Clark. The second area, I think, which is quite important for Southeast Asia, is actually tourism, because tourism, Southeast Asia, has so many destinations, so many cultures, so many food to offer, and tourist arrivals in Southeast Asia is actually very significant contributor to growth. And in terms of tourism, there are different ways by which we can actually leverage on the opportunities from digital tech startup. For example, the first one is the simple e-tourism, where we see basically tourist-related firms adopt websites and digital technology to enhance the interaction with visitors. But now many governments in the region are actually going into a much higher and a more tech-enabled infrastructure for tourism to try to really convert the old traditional tourism offering to something like a smart tourism. So this will allow, for example, the co-creation of technology-mediated products. This also requires investment in tech-enabled infrastructure, and this actually enhances the linkage of value chain within the tourism industry. And this approach of catering to smart tourism bridge the gap between the physical tourism and the digital tourism. So I think that's the second area. I think the third area, which and we are seeing this in Singapore, is really the very large growth in tech startups in the health and education sector. For example, as I mentioned, one of the challenges post-pandemic is actually the labor scarring, and a lot of human capital losses have been incurred by ASEAN economies. And EdTech is actually a very useful platform to really try to catch up with these education losses. In the health sector, we know that the benefits for the region for using digital technology as we age, the requirement for medical services increases, and our hospitals will actually be overburdened. So the use of, for example, sensors and AI to speed up and raise the quality of digital services is quite a big opportunity for tech startup. And we are seeing a large mushrooming of tech startup in Singapore in these areas. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, James. Now let me turn to Erko. Let me ask you two separate questions. The first question is, in your view, what has been the impact of the pandemic, right, COVID-19, on digitalization and digital entrepreneurship? And secondly, it's a more forward-looking question, not actually forward-looking, it's already started. What do you think will be the impact of artificial intelligence, or AI, which everybody's talking about, on entrepreneurship? Erko?
Oh, thank you. These are very, very big questions, obviously. To answer the first, what was the impact of COVID on digitalization? Actually, we did a 5-year survey. No, sorry, it was more like 3-year survey of 500 entrepreneurial businesses in 5 different countries, including China, Thailand, Manila, Philippines, and Singapore. And we basically we shadowed those entrepreneurs for the duration of the COVID pandemic, looking at, well, you know, how were the entrepreneurs able to survive the pandemic and so on and so forth. And one of the most noticeable things was the huge increase in the use of digital technology. So we have a crisis, which is an existential crisis almost, and that forces startups to completely rethink their business models because they cannot meet the customers physically anymore. So we saw a really significant take-up of digital technologies and consequent digitalization of the business models of the venture. So globally, the COVID pandemic provided a major boost for new venture digitalization in general. Okay, that answers that question. Big boost. The second question: what are the implications of AI and machine learning technologies? What are the opportunities they are creating for startups today? This is arguably the richest landscape of opportunities for new digital startups today. To give you an idea, you know the Moore's law, the power per dollar power generation by computer chips is doubling every 18 months and has been doing so for a long time. So this is an exponential progression, meaning that whatever computing power you have available today, in 1.5 years, you will have twice as much. In 36 months, you will have 4 times as much, and so on and so forth. AI is at the moment is progressing and developing at multiples of the Moore's law, meaning that what the AI power that you have available today, next year you will have about 4 to 6 times as much. In 2 years' time, you will have about 15 to 36 to 40 times as much power as you have today. So this power, this technology is really exploding. You have open access, large language models, and you can access ChatGPTs and whatever large language models to really experiment with use cases. And this is where we see tremendous activity today. If I were to start the business today, hoping for it to become a unicorn, a $1 billion valued startup in 3 years' time, this is where I would explore. I would go to ChatGPT, start thinking about, well, what can I use this for? And then experimenting with use cases. It will be cheap to experiment, and the upside potential is tremendous.
Thank you, Erkko. Now let me turn to Yiling. You talked at length about the importance of education in promoting entrepreneurship, and I absolutely agree with that. And the potential social benefits are enormous if you think about it, because especially at the high end, by which I mean in the young individuals with a lot of human capital. Think of an MIT graduate or Caltech graduate, people like that, for example. Of course, there are many other talented individuals as well, but top STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math graduates, right? So, I mean, if just a fraction of them became entrepreneurs who develop highly profitable green technology or green products that contribute a lot to sustainable development, instead of going for $1 million a year job at Wall Street, I mean, the social benefit would be enormous. Now, having said that, the fascinating question is, of course, are entrepreneurs born, or can entrepreneurship be taught, right? Nature versus nurture. So in your view, Yiling, is it useful to start some entrepreneurship education at a relatively young age, like a secondary school or even primary school? Or should we really focus on, as I said earlier, graduates of the top, let's say, engineering schools like Caltech or MIT, or in the Singaporean context where I also lived and worked, NTU or NUS? Yiling?
I love the nature versus nurture question. Again, you know, apart from 500, where I mean we work with founders who are maybe no longer youth, but I work being as a council member of the National Youth Council of Singapore, and then also in my own foundation, Young Founders Summit, we work with students from the age of like 15 to build startups. So I think of that question a lot. I have my thoughts around how we kind of try and collect data on whether it's really nature versus nurture. But you know, we'll probably need thousands more data before we come to something conclusive. But to answer your question about that, I think it goes back to the question of two things. Number one, how do we measure success of any of these frameworks, policies, programs, and so on and so forth? And I think that's why it's so important to have different stakeholders, both from the public sector and the private sector, coming together, right, in order to move towards the same direction. Because I don't think we can implement anything and expect to see big movements or big successes in silos. And why do I say that? Now, if we understand again how a startup gets to scale and grow, at some point in time, they need funding, they need capital. That comes through many different sources. And those different sources will play a huge part. So if we're talking about just coming from the point of view of returns on investment, and that's what almost all the investors look for, you're right, then that we should be focusing on the entrepreneurs who are postgraduates, right? Or in fact, ideally, maybe in their early 40s or late 30s, that is kind of known to be the age where a higher percentage of entrepreneurs actually succeed. However, if we look at it a different way, and what I believe is that entrepreneurship isn't just about education and it isn't just about techniques and models. It's really all about the mindset. And when I ask my youth itself, what do you think are the successful traits of an entrepreneur? A few things come up, but the ones that consistently come up is being able to problem solve and think outside the box, being really resilient and risk-taking and not afraid to fail. When you look at the world, being able to think of like, how do I go around it, over it, or under it, rather than just facing itself. Then I will ask back, you know, if these are the traits of what we feel are going to make successful entrepreneurs, wouldn't we benefit from instilling all these traits and nurturing them from an early age? To me, it doesn't matter, and I'm not encouraging youth to like quit school and go and become an entrepreneur right. But it's that they can learn all about that. They can try, they learn how to fail, they learn how to break up with their co-founders. And the earlier they learn that, the stronger they can become in the future after they graduate when they start their eventual, you know, fourth or fifth startup, whatever that is. So I don't think it's in silo. I do think that we need different interventions at different points in time. But the early one, I feel it's definitely required, but often underlooked.
Tom, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Yeah, so I guess Yi-Ling answers both. We need both early year intervention as well as more focused intervention for promising, let's say, STEM graduates and other young talent like that. Okay, thanks. Now let me turn to Willem. And this is kind of
already touched upon by Yi-Ling, but let me ask you the question anyway. ASEAN is diverse, but there's a pressing need for the region to integrate its entrepreneurial ecosystems in order for compete for global talent and global ideas, right? So how can ASEAN foster more pan-regional, that is pan-ASEAN collaboration and develop the necessary skills to support born global entrepreneurs? In other words, globally mobile entrepreneurs who can scale across borders from day one.
Yeah.
Willem?
Yeah, thank you, Dong-Yoon, for the question. And actually, it was also not only Yi-Ling, but also Julia that mentioned this before, promoting access to markets and access to talent, access to finance. So I rather contribute in a way that maybe in addition to across ASEAN, within ASEAN countries, there is still a lot of talent that is actually entrepreneurial active, but it doesn't reach the full potential. And that is what I'd like to also bring under the attention in this panel, is the second glass ceiling that is in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Women's talent is held back to grow and thrive in this space. I'd like to share what we have done at YSEALI Academy recently. We developed, we held a seminar for which we invited 33 fellows from across the region to think about which skills to develop, actually, and basically promote individual agency to help lift the second glass ceiling that is holding female entrepreneurs back. And those are addressing biases, stereotypical biases. That is the funding gap, but that is also dealing with work-life balance and rather traditional expectations. Then there is the role modeling and personal branding that could all help, I think, to also untap that potential. And that is, I think, in many markets still underutilized. And we can start with promoting this in our current ecosystem and develop our individual agency and lead that change individually. Yeah.
Thank you, Willem. Now let me turn to Erko again. A couple of years ago, you developed the Global Index of Digital Entrepreneurship Systems, or GIDAS, right? Which measures the quality of a country's environment for entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs. So can you just tell us very briefly about the construction of GIDES and the main findings for Asian countries? Erko?
Yeah, so what the index looked at was the country's ability to support digital startups in particular. So it is actually available if we search for AI, like artificial intelligence, but it's Asian Index of Digital Entrepreneurship Systems, AIDS. You should be able to find it. It provides very, very detailed data regarding specific countries. It's a global index, so the country coverage is global. It's restricted by the availability of data, so it doesn't cover all the countries on the planet. But there you can find very detailed data on the strengths and weaknesses of different countries in terms of their ability to support digital entrepreneurship and harness the power of digital entrepreneurs for economic productivity and growth. It is composed of 14 different pillars, so it's a very, very complex index. There's a lot of data involved, but it's very useful in identifying specific countries' strengths and weaknesses. Overall, the Asian countries, the leading countries, according to that index, can be found mostly on the Western hemisphere. That would include Europe. So the leading countries, typically in terms of the quality of the national systems of entrepreneurship, would be the US, Canada. In North America, the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and then some West European countries, including the UK and similar. Within Asia, there's quite substantial variability, which might not be that surprising. So we have countries like Singapore that are very strong. Overall, the index would seem to suggest that Asian economies are in the middle group, so they are improving. They are improving some countries quite rapidly, and and they tend to share a range of challenges, some of which are structural, some of which relate to the attitudes and ambitions of entrepreneurial individuals within the countries, and so on and so forth. It's difficult to summarize Asian countries in one sentence because there's so much variability. So I recommend you search for the index and have a look at yourself.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we turn it over to Deputy Director General Emma Veve, let me ask each of the 6 panelists to give a 1 minute maximum, please time yourself, concluding thoughts on what is, in your view, the most important ingredient for promoting entrepreneurship, or if you want to be more specific about digital entrepreneurship, that's fine, but entrepreneurship generally is fine too. In ASEAN, I think we all agree entrepreneurship matters and matters a lot for economic growth and sustainable development. Let's start with you, Willem. What's the most important factor?
Individual agency, yeah. And that relates to the capability of creative problem solving, and digital tools help you with solving that so-called paradox between economic growth and sustainability.
Erko?
Okay. There's a lot. First is the quality of institutions. What I mean by that is you need to have a strong rule of law, you need to have low levels of corruption, and strong protection of property. This has a big effect on who chooses to become an entrepreneur, and we want individuals with high human capital to do that because they usually open greater productivity potential. Education system needs to support entrepreneurship. That means education system needs to support entrepreneurial experimentation, curiosity, and encourage students to experiment with their ideas. And finally, we need a supporting infrastructure for digital entrepreneurship. So we need to promote digital technology adoption, digital skills, and we need to provide this support infrastructure. With that, I mean new business accelerators, new venture accelerators, new business incubators, and that should do it.
Yiling?
Okay. I'll keep it short. I think more collaboration, especially regionally, less competition, really nurturing the early the early students to enter into entrepreneurship, like what Erko mentioned. If you're building in sustainability in climate tech, this is a great time to be building, especially in the next few years, lots of capital going in there. Really think about how do you start measuring your impact and start thinking big in terms of how you want to measure impact. And I would say the last one would be, I do think that there'll be a shift from people's mindset. You know, a company that does good should be allowed to still make money and make profit out of it. The distinguishment between a social enterprise and a startup is going to become more blurred. In fact, we should be rewarding the businesses that are doing good and enabling them to actually make profits in order to create more impact.
I fully agree, Yiling. I think this trade-off between profit and sustainability is often a false one. I think there's plenty of scope to make profits while doing good or while promoting sustainable development. And there are many, many real-world examples of this. The one I mentioned earlier today, the founder of BioNTech, right? The startup that developed one of the world's first safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. That's just one example, one of many, many. Okay, Julia, your turn.
I also very much agree, as we were discussing before, that that there are a lot of opportunities to make money with the SDG-based business models. But perhaps, let me give a brief answer by combining what Willem, Erko, and Yiling just said. So on one hand, we really need the ecosystem and a well-functioning entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem with all the building blocks in the right place and with, good interaction amongst these different actors, education institutions, the financing players, the big corporations, the small companies, the startups themselves. But if I need to pick one, mine would be the development of an entrepreneurial mindset. I mean, you need the skills, you need the willingness to change things. If you have the infrastructure, but you don't have the willingness, it's difficult to go very far. If you have the willingness, but you don't have the infrastructure, probably you are smart enough or, motivated enough and passionate enough to build the infrastructure around you. So this is the short answer, but very, very final maybe message. The issues we discussed today are very important for the current economic development trajectory of ASEAN, especially given the current geopolitical context. So far, ASEAN has been very active in global value chains, open trade model of development. But as you know, things are becoming more difficult on a global stage. Entrepreneurship, regional innovation ecosystem across the region, they really need to become an important source of economic growth and development, sustainable development across ASEAN.
Thanks. James?
So many things have been said. Probably the two that I would add. One is the important role of digital payment system, and also the availability of strong funding mechanism, including both credit market, grants, and incentives. The second one probably that I'll also mention is the importance of combining economic policies with geographical policies to try to identify clusters of individuals or firms that have the potential to upscale and become a very strong technology startup.
Yeah, that's an excellent last point, and it's a point I also emphasize a lot. Somehow encouraging or inducing high human capital individuals to become socially beneficial entrepreneurs who create great green products and technologies rather than going off to Wall Street and $1 million salaries. Okay, so that concludes a very rich and substantive discussion by the panel. Many thanks to everybody. Now let me turn over to Deputy Director General of Southeast Asia Department, Ms. Emma Veve. Over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. I've been really listening in for the last, couple of hours, hour and a half now. Super interesting discussion, and I've been quietly panicking to myself about how am I going to sum all this up at the end, because it's been a hugely wide-ranging discussion, which has been really interesting to me, and I can see from the number of people who are online and have stayed online for the whole session, it's also interesting to them. So Tom, I really appreciate you asking everyone for those 1 minute wrap-ups of the key points, because I think that really captured the key things that are coming out of this discussion. And I think it was a really timely discussion, looking at what entrepreneurship can do to really try to balance the pressures for financial performance and the pressures for sustainable development. And I think when you think about it, to be really successful, entrepreneurs have to be close to their customer, understand their customer, be in their heads really. And so they're very well placed to react to the challenges, the global challenges out there, and provide customers with what they want, which in this day and age, with the level of concern around climate change, poverty, other environmental issues, etc., the pressures for sustainable development are ever growing. And I think entrepreneurs are really well situated to be perhaps more responsive than anyone to that. I think the clear message coming through, entrepreneurship helps people to help themselves. And that's really vitally important. Southeast Asia has, a whole range, I think we heard of levels of government and abilities and challenges being faced. So being able to look within and draw upon entrepreneurial skills to address the challenges being faced is quite critical to move forward, rather than going, well, where's government? Can they help me? What can they do? To see that the ability to move forward is within. And also the reminder that working together, how can you work cooperatively with other entrepreneurs and move forward and do more together than you would separately in silos, as it was described by one speaker. So look, with that, I'd really like to give a huge round of thanks to Willem, Urko, Eiling, Julia, James, and of course you too, Tom, for facilitating this. I think it was a really interesting discussion. There's a lot of links to click on in the chat with some interesting reading for everyone, and I appreciated this bringing together of sort of some of the academic thinking and the analysis that has gone on around entrepreneurship with some of the sort of hands-on working with entrepreneurs and what people are seeing. And I think a very similar message is coming through, and quite a hopeful message about the great potential of helping to build that entrepreneurial drive. So I'll stop there and just say thanks again to everyone. Really interesting.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director General. And thank you so much to all the panelists and also to all those who attended today's webinar. Good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.